That'd be nice. All right. So basically what I wanted to do, I'll take you through quite a ride today. I prefer that you talk because not every time I can actually see the chat window because I've got to see other things. So I prefer if you talked. So feel free to interrupt and whatever. I might, as I said, I will not see your responses in the chat screen sometimes. So in the chat box, so just interrupt and feel free to talk anytime. This is just a chat. This is a colloquium. This is a discussion. This is not a lecture as such, although I will be teaching you. So one of the things I wanted to start with, because I'm taking you for a ride today, so it's gonna be on a ride. Sorry. So it's gonna be quite an adventure. So, but we start with basics at this very moment. We'll start with basics, and the basic is, what do you think is language? I mean, no, it's not a. It's just I want to engage you a little bit because I want to hear. Typically, what people say that language is words plus what. So what's language? What do you think language is, guys? Or what do you think, or what do you hear other people say or write languages? What does matter? Right. So perfect. Okay, that's it. Yeah. So that's very good. So that's very good. What you did, you actually went into literacy, which is really good. But because whether we talk about LOTE or literacy, it's the same concept, right? We're talking about the use of language for communication purposes. What happens when you actually one day, if you are unlucky to read a lot of texts, professional texts in teaching languages, some of them are good, but most of them, if they come from America, may not be. So basically, when you will be, it's basically what this is what people talk about all the time, words and grammar. And then there is a tradition in Australian um, literacy studies that basically says that the sentence is a core unit of language. Of course, you can hear it, but don't agree with it. But I'll tell you why. I will give you a simple test. I might have given you this test before, but we will run it again just for everyone to make sure that we are all on the same page. Why do you guys think that I don't agree that sentence is a core unit of language? Mike Halliday, he's one of the, Australia has had this famous linguist. We have a lot of famous people, but for some reason, this famous linguist is we're stuck with. And we have a lot of semioticians as well, who are world-class semioticians, people who actually work in the study of meaning. They quoted everywhere. For example, a woman who was a professor of University of Queensland and now is professor of university at the University of Melbourne, Anne Friedman. I might have given you some texts of hers. Anyway, right? So we don't quote her because she doesn't give us what Halliday gives us. Halliday gives us description, whereas she gives us tools for describing things. So that's quite different. Anyway, why do you think I don't like it? Because you said that there's so much more in. So why do you think I don't like that the core unit of language would be a sentence? Was it Natalie? Natalie, that's very good answer. Your answer was actually it was very good, to tell you the truth. Very good. I would say it was very abstract, very high level answer, which is great. That's what I wanted. And I'll give you an example. An example of a sentence, I did find it funny. It's a sentence, right? The question really is, why in this way? Why did we select? So we can say that there is a noun or a pronoun plus verb or whatever we call that thing nowadays plus adverb, right? Sure. So that's the grammar thing. But as we were saying, doesn't tell us much really about why do we make, when we create a sentence. Oh my goodness, something's happened to my computer and it doesn't. Okay, do good things. How do we know which bits of the of what kind of vocabulary to choose? That's really a question of semiotics. How do we know to put I did, or why do we say I did find it funny but not I find it funny or I found it funny? There is a difference in meaning, isn't there? And then how do we know which words to choose? Right? So how do we know this plus this is grammatical, so but it is semiotical, because it's not only, it doesn't, when we say I did, that's an emphasis, right? Now we need to know in what context we can actually do the emphasis and in which context we shouldn't be doing the emphasis, right? And so that's one thing. I mean, what kind of meaning making impact we're creating when we actually use I did find it funny, a kind of emphasis here. I did find it funny once I saw it at the movies, for example. This is not a very good example that I'm choosing, but the real question of semiotic is, how do you know which words to choose in your sentence, right? I mean, to choose words, that we choose words, that's okay. But how do we know which words? And I'll take you directly to video, not video, but thing I have, and I very often mention this guy. So we know it's Mr. Bean, right? We've spoken about him, I think, before. Oh my goodness. Yeah, and I've raised him before because what I wanted to make is the following point. What makes his sketches funny? He still produces sentences, right? He puts words together, but he puts them together in a way that few of us would. Yeah, well, of course, he's got that's it. That's true. That's true. That counts. Right. So basically, we are multisensory beings. So we actually use the entire all the senses we have, and probably the ones that people haven't even discovered yet, in order to actually interact with people. That is true. But if we just focus on the words themselves, I mean, I can imagine that you can listen to his sketches. There's a very favorite one by my husband when he says there's when when he's in hell. And he says, and my name, he's in hell, so he's introducing hell to people, and he says, my name is Toby. Now, my name is something, but you can call me Toby. We keep things here familiar, or I can't remember. This is so hilarious. You can find him on YouTube when he's actually doing this sketch on in hell. Um, but it's very funny. We keep things here familiar. I can't remember why it was funny. I can't remember the entire sentence. I should have written it. I didn't think about it because I thought about. But the point is, he chooses words in a way that even if we listen to it just on the radio, we are quite likely, and you know that there are radio sketches, right? There are radio sketches that are funny, comedy sketches. So somehow we put things together and we know where to pull them out from or what to draw on to make things funny or to make things sad or to give an atmosphere. So it's never coincidental. It's never an accident why we used be as opposed to some other be, right? So we could have used this one, right? So it's never an accident what words we choose. And I think I must have said it before in our classes, but I can't stress it enough. Because when we actually go about creating a resource and thinking about how to teach children, this will be the key, right? Because the idea is now when we teach children, say Indonesian or Chinese or any other language, we don't want them to be English in Indonesian. We actually want them to be aware what they are saying and why. And for that, they don't need dictionary words, because there's no such a thing. There's no such a thing. That B doesn't have a dictionary meaning, because that's how some people, learn English, and they translate directly, or they think this word means this, and it doesn't. And they act out, and they act Chinese even though they're in Australia. I worked today with a student of mine. He's from Cambodia, and because I already have enough of like 30 years of expertise of how to actually, I have enough of understanding of administration language in university, so I can actually understand. I actually know which phrases to use. But as we were researching his data, he was naming categories in his own way, and they had absolutely no meaning in English, just none, because this is not how we actually word these things. So I will introduce you to the concept of genre in a different way than it is done usually in Anglo-Saxon literature of genre. This is from the French literature. Genre is not necessarily only um, the entire text. The entire text could be a comedy sketch. So the genre is not just the entire text and the situation, but each of the words draws on a different genre, on a different system of meaning making. So for example, and I've said it before, that if Ron Atkinson uses this word in combination with this word and you laugh, it's for a good reason, right? Or he uses, so you laugh because you know that either B and C typically are never said together. He mixes two different ways of organizing reality, but he just mixes them in such good way that the contrast between them, or their inability to actually ever meet in a normal text, makes it funny. I was watching his sketch with Elton John. That was very funny. What happened? He couldn't understand for the world of it why Elton John is not John Elton. You can see how much fun he made from a simple genre of English where your Christian name, hopefully John was his Christian name, always comes first. So, I mean, the entire sketch, that went for 20 minutes or half an hour with Elton John himself in it, was him making fun of Elton John being Elton John, not John Elton. But you can hear it. If you're English, if you're native in English or near native in English, you can hear that Elton John sounds artistic. John Elton sounds like a really it's a pedestrian, has a pedestrian sound to it, right? You're kind of not very imaginative, just normal, ordinary. And that's what he's playing. You expect John Elton, but there's nothing artistic. There's no beat to it. But as soon as you call it Elton John, it's great. It sounds okay. That's fun. It's different, and he makes fun of it for 30 minutes just out of that genre. So it's not a sentence, and it's not a genre like introduction or whatever. It's just simply how things fit together in a language. What things fit together and why. What selections we make. The entire functioning of human beings in the world is about making selections. And I will not go there and even further, maybe one day, but not today. But everything we do, we make selections. And these selections belong to what Anne Friedman calls genres or particular ceremonies. So there's a ceremony of saying your name in English. There will be a ceremony now, like the other day, our head of research wrote to one of the doctoral students in Vietnam, and she assumed that maybe the shorter name or maybe the first name, the first chunk of a name was Christian name, but in fact she was wrong. She didn't know. She didn't know how Vietnamese people actually organize their names. So she called her by her surname, and the idea was to call her by her Christian name or first name. So you can see that there are genres of actually organizing names, genres of organizing anything, and when you actually get them, you mix them up, um, you can create jokes, or you can actually be wrong. Point is, this is a very important point when I talk about it. If you are like me, an ESL speaker of English, and you play with different organizations, you know what Australian people do to me very often? I've been here for 30 years. I have a PhD. I've written. I mean, honestly, I've been around, and they correct me. So instead of laugh at the ways how I actually mix things, they get worried that maybe I actually don't know how things should be. So they actually automatically put them back into order, because you can't, as an ESL person, you actually can't play with different items, because obviously it's actually read as a mistake. Whereas entire comedy sketches are based on actually mixing items. But now I want you to actually keep it in mind. It's not that genre is the entire text. Yes, it is. But also genre consists of mini genres, which is of mini ceremonies that people draw on in order to actually produce a text. And that's very important, because not every ceremony that goes in English will actually apply to a persuasive text, or to any or comedy sketch, or to something else in another language. And that's when we have cultural clashes, and things like inappropriacy, or even things like it's just simply not Indonesian. And you can't even explain it why. You just said it's not how we do it. It's just not how it's done, right? So even if it logically makes sense, it just doesn't make sense. So that's the point, right? So big text consists of items, and those items are connected on purpose. And each of these items actually can be linked back to a particular genre. So there's a ceremony of saying a name of a person. There's a ceremony of when you address a person, which one do you use, the first name or second name, and all of that. So every text consists of smaller text. That's what I wanted to say. Now, is everyone clear about this? This is as much as we need to make it today. We'll come back to this thing soon, but I just wanted to make this point so that you don't actually think in solid terms, like genre means just a box. It's not a box. It's little boxes. Lots of them in one. Are we clear? Is that clear? Relatively clear? It's a complex concept for people who are not used to it, right? But as I said, every sentence consists of everything we say has smaller chunks. These chunks were chosen, and on the basis of what? Of our understanding that this chunk and this chunk will come together in a particular genre. So it's okay to use A and B if you want to actually express a ceremony of a prayer. So if you want to talk about spirituality, you choose this word and this word, because these are spirituality words. They belong together. You don't all of a sudden come up with something that comes from a different ceremony, from a different genre. So these words we choose because they actually work within the ceremony of talking about spiritual things or talking about something else. So they are just appropriate. And the reason why they work is because they link to some other texts which are of similar kinds. So every genre draws on mini genres because together they do things in text, and somehow the things they do in text, they share a common spirit, a common function, and that's why we actually draw on them, not on the other ones. So all these choices, small choices of words, and how we bring them together and why, are second to second decisions. So when we learn a language, we have to learn to compare and contrast what goes with what, so that we learn about those big ceremonies and little ceremonials, big ceremonials and little ceremonials. Big ceremonial, like what makes a introduction, and a little ceremonial, why in how why do we make these particular why do we use those particular words, not other words, and what else could we use for that thing, and what do we draw on? And that's the knowledge of language. It's the functional knowledge of language, or cultural knowledge. Actually, I like better cultural. So just to leave it there as a intellectual background for us to hold on to, and that thing, this lesson I gave you, this covers the entire 12 weeks of our course. This is so important for our course. Nothing else is more important. So this is the definition that Natalie gave us, right? More or less, languages are tools, or language is a tool, or languages are a tool for engaging a diversity of meaning-making systems. So as we grow, or as we learn a language, we increase the scope of those meaning-making systems we engage, right? So in the beginning, we can do this much in Indonesian, and then we just increase and we learn. And I call them meaning-making systems, because as we grow, we expand those meaning-making systems and we can do more with the language. And because we can do more, the only reason we can do more with the language is because we have expanded those meaning-making systems. So in that way, we act increasingly informed. Once you grow your meaning-making systems, then you can actually do more. It's very hard for a person to either understand a joke in a LOTE, or even say a joke or tell a joke in a LOTE, because it's really hard. People don't have enough control about the things or cultural things that actually an Indonesian person or a Chinese person will find funny. So we actually engage diversity of meaning making systems in order to participate in the context of life, and we do that in order as we increase our range of the meaning making systems, we act increasingly on an increasingly informed basis. So that's a little definition. And this is the thing from my literacy teaching. So you say I in French, I would be here in terms of literacy, but say my husband would be here, he taught it, everybody thinks he's French. He fools everyone. Every French person could swear my husband is French. Mind you, he was raised multilingually, so that's why. And his education was in French. So this is me in French, this is my husband in French, and so on. We have a sort of, we could call it a line if you wanted to. But I'm drawing it for you to have a particular understanding that there is a difference in scope in terms of the meaning-making systems that I can handle and Andrew Lian can handle, right? I can handle something, but he has the full range, including academic literacy, right? So he can write articles in French. I mean, I can't write for the world of it, and I can't talk professionally in Polish. There is no way I could give this lecture in Polish. I'll just die, right? So we grow a range. So I'm going now slowly into our assignment, the one about creating a resource, but but because we're teachers and because we're paid quite a lot of money, actually teachers are paid, especially if they work full time. We need to actually be informed. We need to actually know what we do and why. So I'm taking you into different aspects of curriculum, and you have seen this. You have seen this figure before, but before we go there, I just wanted to make sure that you know about all of that. So what curriculum has, the curriculum has cross-curricular priorities. So one of them is about Asian engagement, the other one is about sustainability, but sustainability also means community connections, and it also talks about indigenous cultures, which is engaging indigenous cultures, indigenous knowledges in our curricula, the school curricula. Any idea why I'm mentioning these three things? Uh-huh. Exactly, Natalie. What's very important is that, because I already get emails from students who are not that frequently on a thing, but they watch collaborative sessions and they're ready to do a resource. And I'm fully for it. The point is anybody can do a resource, but not everybody can do it in a way that responds to the curricular um, requirements, understands how to read the curriculum, and then translate it into language. How to teach languages. It's quite a task. So rather than me imposing on you how I would do it, I'll take you step by step, and I'll still tell you how I would do it. But I just need you to actually see that if you are building a house, you can't just go and just start putting one brick on top of another brick, right? It's gonna fall. You can't even do it, as you can't just also draw it and do it according to a drawing, because unless you have some understanding of how houses actually should be built, what it takes to build. Like I remember they were showing a house, was it in China or in China, I think. They built this 10-story house and it just fell because it didn't have any foundation, right? So what's important, but when we build a house, we actually have to know, we have to actually create a map of it. And that's what will be your theoretical analysis, so the theoretical statements that will actually precede your resource. Because what I will be assessing, not just how you actually, not only the activity itself, but how you talk about it, how you talk about your resource for students. And what I want to say is whether you can actually build it, whether you actually have a process, right? So what we're learning now is not to create a resource, but we're learning a process. I can do today, I mean, I was talking to someone else just the other day. I can do lots of, because people very often ask me, how do you fit everything in so little time? And I thought about it, and I have processes for things. And when I don't have one, before I actually engage it, I very quickly have a plan, I very quickly develop one, and then I just follow through. And that's what it is. We're not learning to actually create a resource. We're learning we're learning the process for creating resources. So once you learn the process, and once you try this process to try to apply the process practically, what will happen? You might actually notice the value of it. And then, for example, if you actually have a number of these resources at your available to you as a teacher, you only have to create, I don't know, 10, 20, 30, and they're there for life. And that's why it's just, and it's the same with this LearnLine. A lot of things I use from literacy because they actually are relevant for your LOTE education. And I've done them a year ago, 2 years ago, I don't know when, and I can repurpose them and repurpose. I don't have to talk about the same thing over and over again. So this is the first year we're running LOTE units. And once I have more of those recordings with you, I'll just give them to students and I'll be repurposing them. So I don't have to talk about the process of developing a resource in such a detail ever again. So that's the same with resources for teaching LOTE. Okay, so we've got this Asian engagement, so, community orientation, and indigenous culture. So you've got to have this map, and you have to actually write it for yourself on a big worksheet or however you want it. You've got to have it in mind. And think to yourself, how the heck am I gonna do Asian engagement if I teach Italian? Well, that would be very might be difficult. It might be difficult, but it might be quite simple as well. It depends. And I'll show you. You remember how I was talking about comparing and contrasting genres? Wouldn't it be interesting to actually have a look how you do particular things? And since you have classrooms which are actually mixed, you have people from different cultures and different languages, it would be interesting to actually ensure that in your as you engage students in learning, you include resources or materials that are from different cultures and different actually scripts as well. That's very important, not to have just because you're teaching Chinese, you shouldn't be using just one script, because the idea, especially with smaller children, because the idea is for children to actually get used to the concept of writing by looking at it in more than one way. It's always like this. The brain needs to actually compare and contrast. The brain is constructed like this. It needs to actually have a contrast to actually and in context, so that it actually can see that different things do different things. So anyway, Asian engagement and so on. So that's what we have in mind. And then I included these graduate attributes and the concept of capital here, because we do talk, we can remove graduate attributes or 21st century skills, because in every sense general capabilities cover them, right? So different people use different terminology for different purposes, but general capabilities are quite large. So I'll just run this graph through. So we have general capabilities. I work with them as follows: social and personal, ethical and intercultural, critical and creative. Then graduate attributes, and graduate attributes talk, for example, about lifelong learning, and you will have that in critical and creative. They talk about collaboration and leadership, that you will have that under the social leadership, and also, well, leave it there. Then what else? Creativity, it's the same. Social responsibility, it's social and personal. Communication would be under ethical and under intercultural. So you can see that they actually overlap. So I wanted you to see that. And then we have the social capital and educational capital and symbolic capital. So the way any questions for now? I'll just break it now for a moment. Any questions? So am I with you now still? That's cool. Okay. Oh, good. So basically, this is our cross-curricular priorities. These are our capabilities. So as you design as you go about designing your resource, have these two things in mind. These two layers, they're most important. These ones I'll teach you about them shortly, but these two layers. Now I'll break it down in terms of the example. Remember how last time we looked at the village, and then we did things. Can you think, if I could actually copy, could I copy this? I can copy that. So I could do as follows: duplicate the slide, push this to the left. Now, remember how we did the village resource? I ran through it just to show you how you actually can create a resource which is quite encompassing and big and comprehensive, enables children to actually explore different dimensions of functioning in a language. And then you can actually work with this resource in more than one way. But basically, when we had this resource, what do you think you could do with the things we did in order to actually address the cross-curricular priorities? I'll pull them up here. I'll copy and paste them so you can see them. So we had this resource, and so now you're planning your resource, right? You're going, oh my God, I have to account for Asia engagement, sustainability, and indigenous. Oh, you see what happens? My computer's like that. And indigenous cultures. And Ania showed us this resource. So in what way? Yeah, I think we're working it out now. That's okay, but that we're gonna solve it. I hear you, but you don't have an idea, right? But first of all, typically what people say, they give up on it, right? And I often say to people, if you give up on everything, then you will be just, and like I was doing this data analysis with my student today, and he also said with the people he interviewed, they saw relevance in engaging with industry, but they just didn't want to do it, right? Because it was just too difficult and so on, And there's a saying in English, You know, life is beautiful because of all the people, and life is horrible because of all the people. Right? We need to think creatively, and I actually could be very happy myself if you didn't actually do that, but didn't think of engagement of Asian cultures or Asian engagement. But I don't want to give up because I think it's wonderful. I'm honestly, I'm probably the only person you will know on this planet that absolutely loves the curriculum. I think that there are problems there. I'm fully aware of it, but I'm not interested in problems. I'm actually interested in what it actually helps me do. I don't care about the problems. There will always be problems. So, in order to have cross-curricular priorities engaged, what I am suggesting is that you don't, so first of all, look at this. This is the principle one that we're going to learn now. If we have so many outcomes here, so many outcomes here, this is not a good drawing that I gave you because we would have wanted here social and personal, and I don't mind spending time on writing this. This is what will be here, ethical and intercultural capability, and here will be critical and creative. Oh my God, you can imagine how much you need to cover in order, and students have to engage with in order for you to actually apply or work or align with the curriculum. So this is the first principle when you actually work with so many outcomes and so many requirements to be met. Typically, people just give up or draw some links, but they don't account for it properly. The first thing you do, you always engage students in a large activity. It has to be a project of sorts. If you So basically what I'm saying is the idea that you will front up with a textbook to children and teach them a chapter and exercise vocabulary and maybe show a video, that's the 70s and 60s. It's over, right? It's over. That doesn't exist, and it's just bad. Whether you start with your students your Indonesian lessons or Indonesian course, or you start your French course or Italian course or Chinese, you always engage people in a project, right? Can you think of reasons why? If you ever had children, you can straight away. And how much Indonesian they learn at the same time? Okay, well, okay, what we're gonna do, okay, we're gonna push it further, okay, we're gonna rev it up. It's not a bad approach, but I have seen it, and that was the 90s when they actually were crazy about intercultural competence, because what happened, and that's why I asked. I mean, I'm not criticizing. I just think that we do with what we have, and it's and you know, and there's a lot of problems. There's been Australia has had a lot of problems in LOTE education, and what happened? We actually we have neglected this area. That's why people always say we can't learn because this and that, right? So we focus more on the intercultural competence in order to do these things, compare and contrast, and all of that. And I think that that's a step forward. But I think that that's still we actually can learn Indonesian or any other language. If there are, okay, so we try to actually teach students Indonesian, not just about the culture, right? So that's what I am after. Okay, so let me make the point. The reason why she was engaging in projects, and the reason why I'm saying a project, because project always encompasses or calls for many skills. Right? A project is always like, oh my God, how are we gonna do that? What is it that we need to know? Right? A project opens what theoretically we call, and I can't think of a better word, it opens a space of inquiry. Right? This is that oh my God moment, right? So what will we do? So that's why before we even get too frightened with the idea of how do we do Asian engagement, what we say to ourselves, we're gonna do a project. And with children, you do it. When you are with children, you don't say to them, do this, do that if you love them, right? And if you are slightly educated, you just don't go do this, do that. You go to the sandpit and you say, what can we do here? Let's build a castle. So you don't say to them some mechanical things, do this, do this. You don't turn it into a manual. You turn it into an adventure. How could we do a castle? It's a project. So project is very good because then it enables you to think of how the heck are you going to do with this Asian engagement. So if we were to do Asian engagement in a project say, with the community, what would we do? If we do it in Italian, we could actually, when people, I'll give you an example. I mean, it's it's coming. It's so easy now. When you probably see it already. Communities, when people will be actually exploring, when your students will be exploring communities in Australia. All right. So people will be from Asia. And they will be exploring what this person. Remember, we had children. Where do I have this thing? My village. Um, we had children here. I don't know whether you can see them on the bottom, but these drawings that my student gave me, and I can send them to you. I mean, I think that this PowerPoint is actually on your resources. I'm sure it is. But if it isn't, I'll just upload it together with this lesson. But you can see we have children from India here. We have children from Arabic countries. God knows where these costumes are coming from, right? So straight away you have an opportunity to actually explore in Italian because, as you know, in Italian people do talk about Asia and Asian people. We have people, so with people, activities like food straight away or events, Chinese New Year straight away comes in. I mean, to my mind, and I didn't even think much. Garden. Oh my God, have you ever worked with Asian people in an ESL context? You probably haven't, but my students have. And the only thing they talk about is plants. Plants and herbs. Plants and herbs. I mean, nothing gets them going as much as plants and herbs, right? And we have a garden on here on the left. So we have a community houses, different housing in the community, so people can explore differences between Italian architecture, Vietnamese architecture, Indonesian architecture. That's lovely. But you see what I'm doing now? A little drawing like this is inspiring more than a chapter in a single textbook would, right? So what I'm saying now, when we actually create an activity, a resource that is to support students in a particular activity. So what this activity could be here, and this here could be children talking about their own community, what's in Australia. But in order to talk about their own community, like create a little pub presentation, so every one of them will actually present something. They might even use games, but as they talk about those communities, they will use language. I'll give you some other. I mean, maybe whether not today, or I mean, I've got 300 ideas for projects, but you can see when we start breaking down this picture into Asia and into community, because sustainability is about community and indigenous cultures, we can actually have a look about indigenous cultures. So we can have a look at their activities, traditions, clothes or lack of it, so clothing, the way they dress, um, different concepts of family. Like I went to this camp. I don't know whether I don't know where. I keep forgetting where you all live, but I went to this place in Kakadu Park, and this girl introduced us to her community, and she said a man is allowed to have 17 wives, and a woman is allowed to have 16 husbands. I thought, oh my God, I'm moving in. But you can see absolutely different concepts of family and ties, and you can use any language to discuss these things. So what happens as a result? Our children grow big heads, and as they grow big heads, their scope of language is growing. They grow into culture. They expand their intercultural awareness, their social awareness. They not only explore the community in here, they will be talking to a community. They will make a presentation during the open day for the school to the community about their research, and they will talk in Italian about the community, which is diverse, and how much, and they will present the language that they learned during using the resource that you create. So they will illustrate how much they learned about how different clothes are called. So for example, so anyway, so that's pretty much. So you can see an activity like our community or neighborhood, our community or our neighborhood, or you can call it even better because children might be, I mean, it depends on the age of people you work with. It could even be called my friends, right? And then you expand children. Yeah, yeah, go on. It's not about teaching. This is what I will be actually trying to get you out of that kind of thinking. All right. So it's not about no, not about supporting them. Actually, I'll just tell you what the word is for it. I just need to. So it's not about teaching about. So you can still have my friends, and you can, as part of the resources, bring in animals and from different countries, and in different environments, because like for us, you will not actually call you will not, like the Indian people, cherish cows and so on, whereas we eat them. So there are different concepts of animals and so on. You can introduce it, but not in order to actually teach animals. What it is, it's for enabling students to be creative. We are creative creatures. We need to create. If we don't create, we die. Any reproduction of a lesson of a teacher is going to kill a child. I can't think of a better word to actually make my point. So we're not actually teaching them, we're engaging them in creative activities. So they will explore, and through their exploration of different aspects that our resource will actually include, through the exploration and playing with things, that will enable them to create things of their own. So they actually engage in projects in order to create their own expressions. It is a 21st century approach, very different from whatever happens anywhere else, but it is consistent with the curriculum. So they engage in an exploration in order to engage themselves and the community. So they explore in order to create. Right? So that's our pedagogy. And you will see that even in the yeah. Okay. You do it straight away. You do it straight away. At this very moment, we're working with the concept first of the resource, okay? And then as we go into the detail of how to actually integrate language and activities together, I will explain it. But at this very moment, I just want to get you to think about the resource in terms of how to actually go about planning and actually seeing each element as possible. Because so the idea will be that language use is used straight away. And remember, when you enter the class or when you are with your children, even at home, you should be bilingual, but you should actually act like the proverbial German teacher in Poland. Literally have that woman on your mind, and if you have never seen an image of it, create one. This woman, as much as possible, use the German all the time. So first you use two languages to basically say different housing, verschiedene Häuser or Stille, and so on. But then you go to so you basically say in English and in Indonesian, in English and in Indonesian, and then as much as possible you move towards LOTE, right? So for classroom language, that's what you do. But with the resource, I will be showing you how to plan it and how to integrate language so that children come out from doing this resource with wonderful language. But you could, and they will remember it, which is the difference, rather than memorizing book chapters. A chapter in a textbook, a text in a textbook is great the first lesson. Oh my God, it's so interesting. Like I remember doing Helga Gates Einkaufen, right? It was just great. Helga Gates Einkaufen. But then, when we had the next text and the next text and the next text, I had enough of memorizing bloody Helga going shopping, and other sort of things. It just wasn't connecting. Things were not connecting. Our brain connects, but our brain connects only when it actually has a purpose to connect. And the only reason we can actually create a purpose is when our students engage in a creative activity, in an activity that is exploratory, and they explore with a purpose to create something in order to communicate it then to others. So they communicate with one another about how they're going to do it best, and then in order to actually present it to other people so that it actually gives them satisfaction. And that's why I have in my little drawing here the concept of achievement. We will have to, as we actually, so I'm just showing a few things today, as we actually plan our resource, we think of the curriculum, but then we also think that as you will be running this resource in your classroom, you have to remember one thing. Not only the resource has to lead to a project, which is an achievement in itself, but each lesson has to finish on a high note. Every lesson has to give kids an understanding that they actually are moving forward, right? So it has to finish on a high, and then we will be discussing it. Oh yeah, I got it. I got the question. So Natalie, it goes like this. You have a resource because the resource, as you will see, and that's what you saw last week, has materials built into it, has games, has different exercises in it, has different things in it. And all of these things are the materials that students through different activities will explore with you and will work with. So each lesson will be a chunk of the big project. So typically in schools, it's called a unit of work. So a resource is your support base for a unit of work. Yeah? Okay, so maybe we could think of it differently. For Assignment 1, we're creating a resource that will support a unit of work like my friends or my neighborhood, right? And we will have animals there. And again, I mean, I didn't have animals here because no, look, there are animals here. So we could have actually had on the farm or something where it would have, because our community is so intercultural, multicultural, we could have had a game with and things with animals in it included.
Can I give an example of I've done with one of my groups?
Yeah.
When I taught Indonesian, at a school I was working at previously when I was teaching Indonesian, we've done whole terms. The students individually pick their subjects and by topics that they're interested in, and I put forward the Indonesian topic of Kota Saya, my town.
Uh-huh.
And so we looked at the whole subject, the whole term was based around my town.
Uh-huh.
So they looked at the road systems in Indonesia compared to Australia. They looked at the vehicles that are on the road
Uh-huh.
a little bit. They looked at the building styles between the two. They looked at the words, so included all the words.
Okay, but
And
where,
then
where,
they
where
actually
you,
ended up
they'll,
using
okay, Natalie,
when I
but
went to
where,
town and had to go around town and
yeah,
and
that's wonderful. That's exactly what I'm talking about. The difference will be if you can answer my question, they looked where? Where were they looking for these things?
they looked at pre-made materials from previous years from before I was there. We also looked online on maps, and we were using some Blackline masters from textbooks that I had got, but I wasn't using the textbooks themselves for information.
Excellent. So that's, I mean, was it who was teaching it? Must have been a person connected to me one way or another, or my husband who is a professor of languages. Because if I show you talking about maps, look at that.
That's what, yeah, that's actually what
Who was teaching
that was
it?
between, I taught that.
No, but who was teaching? Anyway, doesn't matter. That's a great thing. Look at these maps.
No,
Talking, you invented it.
I taught that. No, it was a teacher named Terry Clark and Kathy Ingram
Kathy
from
Ingram.
Secondary College.
Yeah. Okay. So I can see why. I wonder, Kathy, and it was in what state?
Victoria.
Okay. I wonder because
Both been teaching 20 years nearly.
yeah,
And
because Ingram is a famous name actually in second language teaching actually. Not that she's famous, but there was this guy Ingram guy from testing, and there was Ingram guy phonetician. So I wonder. I mean, it doesn't really matter. The point is when we talk about maps, remember how we were talking about intercultural and also indigenous, and that's so what we will be doing for this unit is something very much along the lines you were talking about my town, but when we actually compile resources, and because we're dealing with students in school, remember we're not teaching them language only, and that's why curriculum is so uh, broad in scope, because we're not teaching we're teaching human beings to be in the world. It's not just language. We're not teaching them language. Language is an excuse, or it's another angle through which we teach children to be in the world increasingly informed. So when you do the maps, I don't know what maps you were using, but what this in this resource, the difference we will be making is to actually to show to children that the thing on the left is a map, because Aboriginal drawings are maps. This is a map from Google Maps, I think, and this is a map on the iPhone. And probably we can think of different maps. We can also show them how to use the Google Maps the way I was showing you last week, which is, how to operate the scaling and all of that, and how to use the Google Maps with the little person, that you can actually walk on streets. So what I'm saying is there are different maps, and I don't know what original maps in Indonesia looked like before the Portuguese got there. It'd be very interesting to look how people were actually working using the concept of a map, because everybody has a map. It's different cultures do it differently. So that would be interesting, and in that way they will learn some cultural information about Indonesia, the things that Indonesian people know, and the things that everybody who learns Indonesian doesn't know. Because if you learn Indonesian in a sort of dry way without this access to a diversity of resources, You have basically you walk you are in Indonesia but you act English. So absolutely exquisite. And that's exactly my point. We create a resource that will support a unit of the teaching of a unit of work, and will compile in it and organize smartly resources for students to see, oh my god, that's a map on the left too. And then it's up to us to actually use Italian or Indonesian to actually explain to children the drawing, what these different items look like. And if you go, I think I will supply you with that. Someone has sent it to me. I might have been from some other, I don't know. I teach so many things, I mix them up. But I will send you, I will attach to this PowerPoint another slide which has actually a whole legend of those Aboriginal signs on the map. You know, where the bird was walking, where the people were making a fire, and all of that. So all these rituals that people have, they do they do actually have a way of recording it, and one of them is actually painting. So that's a map. So as you do the map, how to walk around the town, and it's an exquisite idea how to walk around the town. And I think that my husband, who has traveled all around the world, he would say it's amazing. I mean, simple things, that when you are in a foreign place, just simple things are just so different, so different. How to do, you know, and when you actually are Indonesian, or when you actually are so fluent in that culture, you actually don't see how different they are. So teaching this to compare and contrast, bringing resources together so that children can actually do it. So map, yes, but doesn't stop us to actually include a few different maps for children to actually learn um, to think of the map in more than one way. We don't want them to be white people talking Indonesian. We want them to be actually intercultural people, right? So you can see now that we have connected, just in this simple activity, we have connected the Asian engagement. So I'll remind you here. So community has many people. They cook differently. They have different interests. They plant different plants and they talk about them. They have different cultural ways of actually organizing their lives. Like for example, the concept of the map. People in Darwin. We have many different types of people in Darwin, and Aboriginal people think of the traditional ways of actually mapping the territory in terms of the things they do. So they don't map the territory in abstract terms like we do, but in meaning making terms, like this is where you make the fire, this is where the emu walks, this is the territory of a kangaroo, right? So these are different ways of relating to the land. So just exploring the community itself, it gives us the sustainability, which is community engagement, gives us opportunity to explore the community, the intercultural aspects of our community, and it gives us an opportunity to explore things done by our indigenous people, thinking of integrating their knowledges and their systems as well. Absolutely. So you can see how those cross-curricular priorities, which 5 minutes ago looked so complex and impossible to do, and that's why I love the curriculum, because it actually gives us what I call a checklist against which we could actually see whether the resources we have, the materials we have included in our resource, whether they are exploratory, whether they actually, as a result, are interesting and enable our children to actually become culturally informed.
At that school I said I worked at, Anya,
Yeah,
I wasn't actually able to do the Indigenous culture thing. Just quickly, with that other unit I work, I said I did that public say I actually had to find most of the resources for it. So
yeah.
it was the assignments themselves were established by the other two. But with that unit though, I wasn't able to do Indigenous cultures because we actually had an Indigenous class at school where it was actually, that was all actually taught within the LOTE department. We actually had an Indigenous language subject taught with cultural aspects to it.
So there are two solutions to it. You either leave it out, which I don't recommend. I think that a lot of my people who are actually working at Charles Darwin University would find it racist and exclusive. They actually don't, because similar situation happened in another school in Darwin. So another way to do it, which is what I'm doing in my literacy unit, I will be doing this. In my literacy unit, what I will do, tomorrow I'm teaching these undergraduate students in literacy. What I will do, I will run this thing with them again, this figure again, and now I will ask them questions. I will challenge my students and say to them, if an indigenous person or person who teaches in indigenous schools came to our lecture and gave a guest lecture, which is what's going to happen, what questions will you ask them of how to actually deal with these different aspects? For example, when you think of creating units of work or resources. So what happens now, you can actually invite a guest Indonesian teacher to actually give advice on what to include in order for your unit of work or your resource have materials which teach students to talk in Italian or in Indonesian about indigenous aspects or indigenous culture, right? And that might work. If it doesn't work, then it's sad. But if it does work, it's basically by introducing a person into the process of actually creating resources and asking her to or him to help you in compiling things. And I really hope that works. But it might not work for very good reasons because of people feeling disenfranchised and so on. Now, I'll give you a link to this video. Yeah? Natalie, I'm waiting.
Sorry, I think I'm having mic problems on my end and talking. Yes, sorry, I'm having problems.
No, Sahrudin, I just saw your thing because I said that I couldn't see the chat box because I have to see my PowerPoint. For the assessment, you don't do an essay. This is not an essay. What we will do is create, by resource, what we mean, and compile a compilation of activities and materials that will support you in developing lessons once you run a unit of work based on this resource. So the idea is that this resource will give you a good amount or a good scope of materials or ideas about so that you once in the classroom you could actually run it. I think it asks you only to create five lessons, but the 5 lessons are basically all focusing on supporting students in a project. So and we will discuss it as we go, but basically if students are engaged in the project, they need resources, they need materials, they need also activities that will help them explore these materials in a meaningful way, and then they create. So every time as they explore, they also create. That's why that's why in this PowerPoint, which we didn't in this here, I talk about engagement evaluation, because students, by engagement I mean students explore, but then they pull out stuff out of it and put it into their own little, they create things as a result, and then they explore some more and then create together. So the activities that you will create, the 5 activities, will be about what materials will you create, will you provide students with for them to actually explore or engage engage the culture or engage the language. So what will you put in place for them to explore, and then what lessons or activities will you create to enable these explorations then to feed into a production process, right? So that's the idea. We want kids to actually create things. So it's not a Word document at all. Yes, so they can be games, they can be websites, they can be informations that you pull out from the websites and you just put, or movies that you will just make links to. Either way, they need. I will show you what to integrate. I mean, I have shown you some examples already last week, but and I will go through it. I just wanted. We only have another 10-15 minutes left. I just wanted to run quickly through, not quickly, but just through the structure. So basically, we are more clear about the idea that we can actually engage cross-cultural priorities when teaching Italian, right? We can. So that's very important that we actually think. So now what we're thinking is, if we engage students in a project, my friends or my village, my community, my neighborhood, don't ask me, I can't think at the same time as and spell. Okay, so any of these, so and you give children reason why we're gonna do it, right? We give children reason. So I think I spoke last week about how to engage children, how to give them reason. One reason could be that we actually would like to use the language. I don't know. I can't think about the reason now. So you have to listen to something I've done before, or I will discuss it next week. But you actually create a reason. Last time the reason was something to do with the age care center, right? It was to actually do some explore. We explored the map and we found the age care center, and we know that in an age care center there are older people and we would like to help them. So something like that. And our helping, visiting children in the hospital and doing books for children and so on. Here could be that you actually have a sister school somewhere in Indonesia, and we want to create a website. So we want to describe our community on that website. And how are you gonna do that? How are you gonna create a website describing your community in your town, unless you actually engage in a project that will help you to think of a community in more than one way and explore and identify vocabulary, identify how to actually create texts about it, right? So that's an engagement. So we have a sister school and we want to actually do something for them. So that doing something for people, and as you do for people, you learn about yourself. So there, I wanted to, I didn't record this thing for, as I gave a presentation in Asia, but you will not be able to hear it much. Do you know what it is? Does anyone know? This is the X factor, right? So this guy sings. And what I wanted to actually draw your attention to make you experience social capability, ethical capability, and critical capability. Let's look at that thing. If you can actually hear it, that'd be great. Put your headphones actually really tight on your ears, because it actually is not gonna come through that easily. It's really soft, because it's not right, because my microphone is connected to my mouth, not to the anything else. Anyway. All right, did you hear it? Did anyone hear it? He's singing that song, "Would you dance if I asked you to dance?" Okay? And then he goes, okay, would you run and never look, I don't know, whatever, right? So he's singing in English. Look at people's faces. You can't hear it. I know that. I'm aware of it. That's why I'm translating. So he's singing in English and everybody's pleased. You can see their faces, right? Oh, it is difficult, I know. Look at them. Would you cry if you saw me crying? Would you save my soul tonight? And what? She's happy, right? This is a very important moment. She's happy, right? So the judges like it. And watch what's happening now. Si purvieras tu héroe. Look what happened. He's now singing in Spanish. And look at her. Before, she was sitting there quiet and pleased and happy. Now he switched the language. He now sings it in Spanish. And look what happened to her. Obviously, look at her face and her hair. I mean, the bet that she has some Hispanic background in her is quite high, right? Look at other people, what's happening now. Look at the girl. She has dark hair. Don't know whether she has a Spanish background or not, but she's just about to cry, right? blonde girls, look at them, they sit there, but their arms are not in the air, right? So some people are touched, but some people are sort of like, oh, it's all right. It's all right. He has a hand on his heart. I don't know why, maybe he's a father or whatever, but let's listen. That's another judge woman. Look at her. She's just beyond herself. She can't even drink that drink. Look at this girl. Clearly a Hispanic background. Look at her. That's shining. Okay. The point I wanted to make is as follows. Why, when he switched the language, and we will just go, why when he switched the language, there was this reaction? Not exactly what he did. Now we're going to look at capabilities, right? So educational capability. What did he do? He showed, I speak Spanish. I'm not just English, I'm multilingual. He's showing his education money, his education currency, right? I can do it in both. But then what else happens? Symbolic capital. Not symbolic, let's look at the social capital first. What did he do, social capital? He connected with people who were Latins or were connected to the Latin culture, right? A lot of white people in America are connected, not that Hispanics are not white, but I'm just so a lot of Anglo people are connected to Latins, to Latinos, so that's okay. But there is, what's the population of America in terms of Latino? What is it, 30, 40%? Who's counting by now? You can't even count. Millions of them are of Latino background. So the likelihood that there would have been Latino people in that audience is very high. Now, if you speak a first language of sorts, and then you learned Indonesian as your second language, or Italian as a second language, or English as a second language, you will have to know it. I mean, I knew it all the time, but I didn't have theoretical terms for it. So I'll use my terms. You will know it that your first language is in your bones. And that means that if you hear your first language, you feel it through your heart, through your stomach. Spiritual people call it through your solar plexus, right? You feel it. You don't actually just understand it. You feel it because you were constructed by your first language. So now when he's actually singing in the reaction from people in Indonesia when I spoke was a shock, right? And a lot of were very, very happy. Exactly. It's a completely different. That's why we learn languages. It's not in order to be necessarily fluent, but to make emotional connection. Now, he wants to win the competition. He knows that at least 50% of the audience is Hispanic. Is Hispanic. What do you think he's using his Hispanic language for? To connect with them. But there's another aspect to it, which is the symbolic one. Right, so now I'm just bringing you now in practice that the three capabilities: educational, social, and now symbolic. The symbolic is what? The Latins were underground people. They were subhumans for a very long time. They were just above the Negro population, just above the Black African population, right? Just a touch. And what he's saying, it's okay to be Latino. It's okay to be bilingual. We are just, this is about equality. And what he's saying, Spanish does have a place in America. We have together with Anglo people, we have made America. So it's okay. And that legitimation nowhere else but on an international stage of X Factor is powerful for people. It's powerful if he spoke Polish. A lot of Polish people would cry this very second. It's always touching when your culture is legitimized by another culture, and especially by a international audience of which most of people speak English, right? It's always powerful. So that's the symbolic capital here. So this guy, a little move into Spanish, and you can see what it created. The audience went hysterical. The judges, two of them were Hispanic. So what a better thing to do but milk it. Right, so you can see now why I talk about those capabilities. They're not just curriculum oddities that are sitting there. What I'm saying is we need to connect with people through education to show our scope, through our ability to actually work with different types of people, to connect to different audiences. So that's our social capability, our ability to create connections. and then a symbolic capital to legitimize other people through this, right? So we don't actually walk all the time as colonial people who speak English and we just are here to, make you whiter. And I'm not saying that we always come with that attitude, but what I'm saying is it's amazing, just amazing. Now, a different story happened to me. Your Indonesian audience was happy when you said some words in Indonesian, you started talking in Indonesian. What the Indonesians did to me, because I didn't speak Spanish, what happened, I showed them this song, I forgot this. I showed them that song to you last week. I showed you this song, that English song. And the words were written, I don't know whether they've ever heard the song, but the song is very, the gum tree, with lots of plum trees, something, and a sheep, a kangaroo, blah, 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 Anyway, that song. The words were projected on the screen. I had 400 people in the room, and to connect with me and show me their love, because Indonesians function by love, they all sang it. I had a room of 400 people singing my song. I mean, how do you think I felt? I was crying. I was so touched that these kids, because most of them were students, came there and wanted to please me so much, right? So you can see how language actually does. It's not just words. As Natalie said, and as you all know, it's not words. We are constituted by it. So by actually being aware how far-reaching language is in order to build or break connections, we have actually spoken here, and I think that's why I actually love these. I mean, um, capabilities, because on the one hand they actually invite us to think of the social, personal, cultural, ethical, and creative and critical, but I also have broken them down, each of them, to the social, educational, and symbolic capital, because in each of them you can actually draw on these different forms of capital. This capital comes from the greatest sociologist, or one of the greatest sociologists we had on this planet, which is Pierre Bourdieu. And I think that not actually being aware of it and not being aware how to integrate them is actually a downside. So we've got these capabilities: social, personal, ethical, intercultural, and so on. And all they say to you is that each of them will have some outcomes. So you have a look at the outcomes for each of them in the curriculum. Social, I can tell you, social is basically about being with people, relating to the audience, relating to someone else other than yourself, and building networks, building connections, being happy, producing, for example, a website for a sister school, right? So you learn as a result about yourself, but you also learn about others. Ethical or intercultural, learning how to actually be with people, to be inclusive. And at the same time, create critical, which is make those selections, the selections you make about how to be with people and how to act in an ethical, interculturally aware way. These selections are actually teaching you critical thinking skills, and you do it in order to actually create things, build things with people, and that actually addresses the creative capability. But as we are creating a resource or little activities, or actually collecting materials for each of those capability, I will show you how each of those capabilities, like creating teamworks, or looking for materials which enable students to actually develop their cultural skills, or creative thinking and critical thinking, how for each of them we can actually include materials that address the social, educational, symbolic capital, the capital that on which he drew in order to actually bring the audience on his side, right? To bring the audience on his side, he drew on the cultural, on the educational, and on the social capital. He showed that he is a person of the modern times. He speaks more than one language. He shows that as a result he can connect to people, and he showed that he can actually legitimize them in this way. So this is very, very important to actually think of those of this different types of capital when we actually create resources that address these capabilities. I'm gonna leave you with this thought, because it's a complex thought, but it actually just leaves us where I want to go next week, because next week we might actually evaluate a number of resources. I have prepared them for you, the ones you've seen. So that's my village. You've seen Sam, right? You've seen Sam. And I also want you to have a look for all the children. I want you to have a look at the website I created, which is the Pecha resource. If you don't know what's Pecha, I can tell you everybody in Indonesia loved the idea. And this is a project done with ESL migrants in Darwin. So my friend did that. My student, actually a student, um, Master of Education by coursework. She did this, and then she did these things. I'll take you through all of that. So what happened? So there are a number of ideas of how we can actually um, create activities that, in terms of these three different types of capitals, address the social, ethical, and critical and creative capabilities. So that's gonna be next week, and I flagged a little bit of it to you. But as you can see, what today I wanted you to say is that creating a resource is not just sitting down and putting 5 exercises together and that's it. You need to have a map. It's a map that is aligned with the curriculum. We have looked at how to do it, and we did it step by step. We have noticed that actually doing things like creating a engagement, including cross-curricular priorities, is not difficult, in fact, because when people engage in projects as opposed to reading a textbook, they actually can do it. I have also given you a pedagogy into bullet points, because that's really what we want to do. Here it is. So we're pretty much on a good start for lecture 3. We're a little bit late, but all right. So any questions? Absolutely, because you are an intellectual, you're an academic, you're actually a teacher. It's an intellectual class. You have to actually produce a justification for what you will be doing, and in that justification, I would want to see the things that I taught today. So you can actually copy and paste things from my PowerPoint, because it will be for you available. No, no, don't ever use the notes. I never read them. I never read the notes. You put them on the slide 1 and slide 2, slide 3. So for example, I don't know whether I have it here, because sometimes I remove things for students' purpose. But okay, so this is the game about Sam, right? But before the game, I had a number of slides here that were actually justification of it. And I have removed them, because then later on I was just showing the game to students, so I removed them. But my village, I don't know what my village, oh, this one doesn't have, but another one, another different, I opened different copies, and I think that the copy I opened for students last week actually had a little justification before. So you do produce a justification in terms of a curriculum there, and in terms also of the readings you have covered for this unit. So I want to also see what you have read and how you integrated those readings into the PowerPoint, into the justification of the PowerPoint. So it's not a simple assignment. That's why I think it's not due until week 8 or something. It's not as simple. It requires mapping out the whole thing, understanding it has to connect with curriculum, learning these new concepts that I am teaching, and maybe also reading 1 or 2 or 3 resources and drawing on them to back up your activity. May 1st, right. Okay, well, so that's more or less May 1st is due. So we've got quite a long time, and we've covered quite a lot already, and 1 week more. And so we're learning also at the same time. You might not say it, but we're actually learning how to assess and how to actually what the text is. We have covered what the text is by looking at actually the concept of a genre, and we will be now working with this concept of text as we develop this resource or as we discuss this resource that I created, right, and implications for your work. So we will be integrating more the concept of what text is as we are working through this resource, and also how to assess, because you see what happens very often, people don't know how to assess because they don't know what was involved. But if you have this wonderful map, right, and then you actually know what you did with students. Actually, I might use this slide, which is more encompassing. So you have a map, and you had your activity with students here, or your unit of work, but you know what was involved. This was involved. This was involved, and in this you draw on. And this was involved and you drew on this, and this was involved and you drew on this, right? And we'll create materials. So examples here basically is the materials we'll be engaging. Now you know what kind of outcomes you have covered for social and personal capability, and for this, right? You will know what outcomes you covered, because this is why you actually quite on purpose included certain materials and did not include others, right? You knew what you were doing. So these outcomes, so if you actually, these outcomes will be your frame of reference in relation to which you will be doing your assessment. You can see, so if you have a structure in relation to which you create your unit of work or your lessons or your support for students active project, if you have a map, if you have a frame of reference, you then use it for assessment. It's as simple as this. So while I might not be instantly now talking about assessment and what is text, like, it's actually all there. So the curriculum is here, assessment is here, designing things which are aligned with the curriculum, assessing in relation to a curriculum, and also understand what text is and how we will be working with the concept of text in order for children to actually produce text in LOTE. We want children to produce text in LOTE, and that means also engaging intercultural understandings, right? Not in English necessarily only, but in LOTE. So I might finish now before we get kicked out from the web, from the Collaborate. I don't know why we weren't kicked out. It should finish now. All right. So are we happy to finish for now?
Yes, thank you.
All right. So that will be on the YouTube sometime tonight. Okay. Okay. Bye bye.
Okay.
Okay. Bye. Thank you.